Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I am here to take a look at the Teferi Planeswalker deck from Magic the Gathering. This is from Core Set 2021 and it's a blue deck. According to the back, you get Teferi Timeless Voyager. As a master of time magic, Teferi wields the lessons of the past to forge a better future. Clean your opponent's clock with an overwhelming number of resources. You get a deck box, 60 card deck that you can play tabletop or online, and one 15 card booster pack, as well as a strategy insert and 2 reference cards. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. You get Teferi Timeless Voyager. It's a 6-mana 4 loyalty planeswalker. For +1 you draw a card. For -2 put target creature on top of its owner's library, and for -8 each creature target opponent controls phases out until the end of your next turn. They can't phase in. Here's our deck with some awesome Teferi artwork. Inside we get our deck, our strategy insert, and our single pack of Core Set 2021. This is a little bit less than the usual planeswalker deck, but it also has a lower MSRP. The strategy insert has just a little bit of information about Teferi and his character. It's not much. It's not really enough to give you any history, really. But there's that. We also have some information on how to play the deck. It's very vague and it doesn't tell you what cards do what and how to really strategize with your deck. So it's not that useful, but at least it's something. And then you have some information about some of the mechanics that you're going to find in the deck. On the back, it tells you a little bit more about planeswalkers and how they work, which is important because it is a complex type of card that isn't really apparent what goes on from just looking at it. So, here's the deck. Teferi's Wavecaster appears to be the rare for the deck. It is a 5-mana 3/3 with Flash, and it's a Merfolk wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you can grab Teferi from your deck or your graveyard, so that is a nice potential trick there. Historian of Zhalfir appears to be Teferi's uncommon, and it's a 4-mana 3/3 human wizard, and whenever it attacks, if you control a Teferi planeswalker, you draw a card. It's great if you control a Teferi planeswalker, and otherwise it's not amazing. Mystic Skyfish appears to be Teferi's common card, and it's a 3-mana 3/1 fish, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, it gains flying until end of turn, so it pays you off for drawing cards. And then you have your tip card with combat damage information on one side, attacking and blocking on another. Popular Magic formats, which is not that useful for somebody who's buying a Planeswalker deck and doesn't really have much information on where to go next. And then a turn guide, which is useful for somebody who is new to Magic. And then you have your code that you can use to redeem this on MTG Arena, which is great because it's nice that you can play this deck in both places and you're paying one amount of money to have this deck in both places at the same time. I've already used this code, so don't try to redeem it yourself, but that is the deck. I'm going to play this against its peers and I'll be back to let you know what I think. So I had a little time to play with Teferi's deck, and here are my thoughts. The first thing that's really obvious from playing this deck is that it is a card draw deck. That is its strategy, and it's a strong strategy. Drawing cards is a great way to try to win the game. That said, the strategy synergizes with Teferi's creatures in particular because not only do you have a lot of spells that will draw you cards, but many of the creatures benefit from you drawing extra cards. Typically, it's the second card that you draw that matters in a particular turn. And so, for example, Teferi Vandal grows stronger with +1/+1 counters when you draw your second card each turn. It is limited by only being the second card, and so that means that any additional cards you draw on your own turn won't get you counters, and then you have to draw 2 cards on your opponent's turn. And so there's a limit to how fast your Fairy Vandal can grow. But that's there. The Mystic Skyfish and the Tome Anima both get evasion as a result of you drawing your second card in a turn. Historian of Zhalfir and the Jeskai Elder are ways to draw cards. And then there is also a little minor instant and sorcery sub-theme here as well, which the Storming Entities and the Shipwreck Dowsers play into. The Dowsers getting you cards back from your graveyard that are instant sorceries, and the Storming Entity costing less to cast if you played an instant or sorcery this turn. Fortunately, this deck does have a number of instants and sorceries, particularly in the 3 copies of Opt, the 1 copy of Stern Dismissal, the 4 copies of Frantic Inventory, and the 2 copies of Gust of Wind. And these cards, except for Stern Dismissal, all give you the ability to draw a card as well. And because of that, they power your ability to use your abilities of your card draw payoffs amongst your creatures. And so the idea of this deck is basically to get evasive and to hit your opponent while drawing cards, which will get you the ability to play even more creatures and then even more spells to draw more cards, and then snowball is the hope. Unfortunately, this deck doesn't have a ton of interaction. Your interaction comes from the Stern Dismissal, the 2 Charmed Sleeps, and the 2 Gusts of Wind. And these are your ways of dealing with your opponent's creatures, which is really more of a tempo play. You want to slow down your opponent's more intense threats and then just try to outdo your opponent in terms of damage before they can do anything. And Teferi himself plays really well in terms of Planeswalkers. I mean, his powers are just generally good. He had the ability to draw a card at +1, to tuck with -3, and the -8 basically gives you a couple turns to finish your opponent off if you can. And that's basically the deck here. I do think that some of the choices here are a little curious, like the existence of a single Stern Dismissal, and the Gust of Wind plays into the most minor of flying themes here, because the Skyfish can become a flyer, the Fairy Vandals are flyer, and then 3 of your 5-drops are flyers as well. But it is primarily just a way to draw cards while also bouncing one of your opponent's creatures. There is also a Mantle of Tides, which could power up your creatures at instant speed as well. Like if you cast an Opt on your turn while you're attacking and your opponent makes a favorable block, you could use the Opt to move the Mantle of Tides onto the blocked creature that it would do the most damage with. And for example, that's one way of taking advantage of the card draw abilities of this deck. But in terms of general power level, I think that just because the deck offers you the ability to draw cards, it can be quite strong. There is a capacity for the deck to snowball, but it's also a little bit on the slow side. And that's because it doesn't have a very aggressive game plan. And a lot of times you are playing overcosted creatures and hoping to go off with them using the draw card effects. But if you draw your cards in a order that is not very optimal, then a lot of times you're just going to be hoping to draw into whatever that will eventually be able to do some damage. And if you're on the back foot, this deck is going to have a hard time catching up. Fortunately, you can draw a bunch of cards so that you can find your answers, but the deck is fairly light on answers as well. And so I think that this deck will require a bit of thoughtful mulliganing in order to make sure you have the cards you need in the opening hand as you get started. And that's basically it for this blue deck, which also is the last of the blue Planeswalker decks. If you had a chance to play with this deck, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.